I'm Marjorie Rosenberg from the IATEFL Membership Committee of IATEFL. On behalf of IATEFL, I would like to welcome all of you to this 8th webinar in our series. This one is audio only, so after I'm finished with the introduction, you'll see the slides but not the presenter. And today I have the real pleasure of welcoming Tessa Woodward as our presenter. Tessa is a teacher, teacher trainer, and the Professional Development Coordinator at Hilderstone College, Broadstairs, Kent, UK. She also edits the Teacher Trainer Journal for Pilgrims, Canterbury, UK, and was president of IATEFL from 2005 to 6. And now Tessa is one of IATEFL's international ambassadors, a new position which was created in the last year. She founded the IATEFL Special Interest Group for Teacher Trainers and Educators, now called Special Interest Group, or SIG, TTTED. She's the author of many books and articles for language teachers and for teacher trainers. Her book, Thinking in the EFL Class, was published in 2011 by Helbling Languages. Her book with Seth Lindstromberg, called Something to Say, and of course it's the one I stumble over, also published by Helbling, will be out fairly soon. In 2013, she founded the FAIR List, a new award for excellence in gender balance of speakers at UK ELT events. This webinar would not be possible without our tech hosts, and I would like to thank Matt Hausdorff, Mercedes Viola, and Claire Hart for their invaluable support today. In addition, I would like to welcome participants from the EVO groups, so the English Village Online, who have joined us today. We recognize some of the people in our group in the chat box. If you have a question, please write it into the Q&A pod on the screen rather than into the chat box. You'll find this pod below the slides. At the end, Tessa will endeavor to answer as many questions as possible. We will make the slides from today's webinar available for 1 week on the IATEFL website. They will then be moved to the archives for members to view along with the recording, which will go into the archives directly after the webinar. As website updates, however, are done by the IATEFL head office and they're closed over the weekend, both the slides and recording will not be available until next week. And now over to Tessa.
Hello. Can you hear me, everybody? Yeah? I hope you can. Okay, I'll go. Thank you very much, first of all, Marjorie, for the introduction. That's great. This talk today is called Enjoying Personal and Professional Creativity. So I guess I should enjoy also creatively introducing myself by saying different things, which is that I'm a second alto. I have a new friend called Nemo, and I could probably be a fruitarian. So that's just by way of a slight change of intro. The aim of this webinar, well, let me see how we're going to do this. First of all, I'll tell you half a story, and then I'd like to consider the nature of creativity, what it is, if it's a good thing or a bad thing, and then put forward the idea of a 3-phase cycle that may help us all as a kind of catalyst to becoming even more creative than we are. 3 phases, and within these 3 phases there are some practical ideas. I will romp through perhaps a short example of each of these phases, and sometimes these will be examples for ourselves as just normal old human beings, and some for our work in the language classroom. Then I'll come back to the half of the story, which I told at the beginning, and there will be a list of resources at the end. If we have a little bit of time, I'll whiz through those swiftly so that you can note which ones are of general interest, which are about education, and which are specifically for us as language teachers. And then we'll finish as usual with your comments and questions. So that's kind of what I'm aiming to do, which is means I've got to get cracking now and work pretty quickly. First of all, half a story. Now, once upon a time, there was a teacher, and she wanted to get across a very important point to her students. So she asked the students to bring a big bucket to the classroom and to fill it with big stones. So they did. And once they'd done it, she said, well, what do you think? Is that bucket full? Well, yes, they said. Well, she said, I am not sure. Could you please go and get some small stones now, some shingle and some pebbles to add in? Well, they were very nice students, so they went off and they brought back some small stones and some pebbles, put them in the bucket, and the teacher said, well, what do you think? Is that bucket full now? Well, these students weren't daft, and they had been once bitten, so they were twice shy, and said, we're not sure. So the teacher then said, well, could you please go and get me some sand? Well, they sighed, but you know, students in those days were much more biddable than they are these days. So they actually went and got some sand, and they trickled quite a lot into the bucket, in between the big stones and the small stones and the pebbles. Well, said the teacher, what do you think? Is it full now? Is the bucket full now? Well, they were pretty sure it was, so they said yes, partly because they were tired of fetching and carrying. But the teacher was relentless, and she said, well, could you please go and get some water? So they did bring some water, and they trickled some water in, and sure enough, they got some water in, and air bubbles were coming up, bloop, 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 until the bucket was completely full, swimming in water. And everybody agreed, yes, this bucket is now full. So then the teacher asked the students, what do you think was the point of that exercise with the bucket and the stones and the pebbles and the sand and the water? And that's where I'm going to stop the story, just for now. Come back to it later. Okay, now let's have a look. Where are we going to go? Question 1. What is creativity? Now there are always two places that we can go for knowledge. We can go outside ourselves, so in this case we could go to a dictionary and we could look at sort of standard kind of definition of creativity, which is that it's, for example, the bringing into existence, the causing, the developing of original ideas. It involves a changing condition or the use of something in a new way that produces interesting and useful results. Kind of dictionary definition you might find. But as well as going outside for knowledge, we can also come inside for knowledge, and we can use our own experience and think, well, if we were asked as teachers or invited into a colleague's classroom to observe a lesson, and we came out of that lesson and thought to ourselves, wow, that was a really creative lesson. Now, what kinds of things would we have seen in the lesson that would make us feel that it was creative? Well, I've asked people this kind of question before, and some people have said, well, there was spontaneity in the class. Or, oh, I like the fact that the teacher used music. And there was colour, she used coloured paper, colour on the board. Lots of variety, different things happening all the time. And it was fun some of the time. And there was humour. For me, humour means that it was a creative class. Some people like to see movement in a class, and they find that a creative kind of a lesson. Other people might say, well, it was creative because the students were able to find personal meaning in the class. Other people might say, well, it was, at moments, it was unpredictable, and I like that. Here are some other things that people have said about creative classes. There was freedom. People could choose which of three things they did. Some of it was unexpected. And some people might say, you know, there was a balance. There was a balance between the students being challenged on one side, but then there was a kind of a secure atmosphere on the other side. Or you might say there was a balance between relaxation and a bit of tension sometimes too. And other people might say there were new combinations. I knew the different pieces of the class, I recognized things, but they were put into new combinations. So all these sorts of things, you will probably want to add other things for yourself, other things that would make you feel that a class was creative. So when we're thinking about creativity, we can go outside for a definition to a dictionary, or we can just work on our own feelings and our own experience. But here's an interesting question, I think. Is creativity a good thing? We kind of assume it is, but is a new creation always welcome? I mean, think about babies. I mean, are all babies always welcome by everybody in the family? I mean, some babies just come too early, and some babies come too late. Some are completely unexpected. Some, sadly, are actually unwanted by some of the family at least, and some are, well, shh, we shouldn't say it, but some are a bit ugly. And just like babies, you know, creative ideas are not always met with a welcome. The worlds of science and art are full of creative people who were actually ostracized or even persecuted for their ideas. I expect you've heard of Ignaz Semmelweis. He was a Hungarian physician, lived about 1818 to 1865. And yes, he was a physician working in hospitals and saw huge numbers of deaths of women after childbirth. They contracted something which was called purple fever or childbed fever very often. And this troubled him, and he thought about it. And he suggested the absolutely outrageous practice of doctors washing their hands between patients. He had a feeling this might help to lower the number of deaths. Now, the reaction of the medical community was really hostile. Oh, they said, washing our hands every single time we finish with one patient, you must be crazy, it's just too much work. And of course, in the background, probably, they were thinking of the distress at the idea that actually they were causing deaths. That would be a hard thing to come to terms with. Anyway, poor old Semmelweis, after 15 years of trying to get people to accept the new practice of washing hands, he actually had a nervous breakdown and he died in an insane asylum. Of course, he happened to be right, but we didn't know that till later. So that was Ignaz Semmelweis. There he is. Another example is Roentgen, who was a German physicist, and he produced and detected electromagnetic radiation in a wavelength, the range of which we today know as X-rays. This happened around about 1895. Now, this is a brand new thing in its day. Can you imagine, given the period that he was in, that if somebody showed you at that time, you looked at your hand, your normal hand, which if you hold it up you can look at it right now, and then imagine somebody showed you an X-ray of your own hand, and suddenly you could see all the bones and things inside. Well, that's exactly what Roentgen did. He showed his wife an X-ray of her hand, and it completely freaked her out. So actually, X-rays were greeted with surprise and actually with shock. And quite a lot of people thought that actually they were hoaxes, that it was some kind of trick. So there we are, lots of reactions to the new. And in fact, a while back I wrote an article, you can see the name of it there, Carrot Ice Cream, and it was a kind of a catalogue of all the different reactions that people have when they meet something new. I mean, when some people meet something new, they just don't see it at all. They just refuse to see that it's there. And other people say, oh, I knew that, that's nothing new. And other people say, is this the same as that other new thing that I heard about the other day? Which actually is completely different. So there we are, a whole exploration in that article. It's in the references, I'll show you later. The point here being, well, is creating a new thing always a welcome thing to have around? And of course the answer is, well, no, not always. Let's suppose though, let's imagine that we do want to be creative people in our personal and our professional lives. The next question is, are we born creative, or can we become so? Or can we become more so? Now, of course, we must all be really creative, all the people listening and talking today, because somehow or other we have managed to carve out the time in our busy lives to attend this webinar. But I don't know what it's like in your culture, and I can see from the list of participants we've got people from all over the world, from Abigail to Zena, we've got Uruguay, we've got Kazakhstan. Welcome to everybody. Lovely to have you here. I don't know what it's like in your culture, but there is a tendency in the UK to think that you're either born creative, you're born a genius, or you're not, and that's about it. And there is a story of somebody who went to a concert, and the violinist who played was absolutely wonderful, brilliant. And the member of the audience went up to the violinist afterwards and said, "Oh, thank you so much, you're a genius." And the violinist was actually pretty mad and said, "Do you know, for 40 years I have been practicing 10 hours a day, and now you call me a genius?" So, yeah, I would say that in UK culture, sometimes we think that people are either born geniuses, like, you know, Mozart, Bach, born that way. And the implication, if we say this, I guess, is, well, I wasn't born a genius, so, well, you know, there's nothing I can do about it, really, so I don't even have to try. It's kind of lazy, really, isn't it? I mean, we could also say, I wasn't born a marathon runner. I was born just a helpless baby. I couldn't even walk. But we don't accept that. We know that we can get stronger and fitter and become a marathon runner, or a violinist, or a singer, or a sewer, or whatever we want to be. So you can see the answer that I have to this question. Are we born creative? Well, we probably have lots of innate gifts, but can we become more creative? Yes, I think we can. So let's have a look at the next question. How can we get better at being creative? And actually, how does it feel being creative? Now, there was a gentleman called John Tusa, and he has interviewed, well over 50 established artists, painters, sculptors, musicians, architects, filmmakers, all sorts of people who are considered to be extremely creative. And he has asked them very, very similar questions. And one of the questions is, how do you feel when you're working creatively? Now, I'd like to run a little poll at this stage, if the wonderful techie people will help me here. We have a poll. Can we see the slide for that? Yes, there we are. I hope you can see it on your screen in the middle. It says, imagine you are a painter in the middle of working on a new canvas, creating a marvelous new picture. How do you think that you would feel? Exhilarated? Pretty positive? Nervous? Very negative? And just clicking what you think would be the answer. And that could be pretty interesting. Well, it looks like you guys are thinking the same way I would think too. I would imagine that I would be really, really exhilarated and feel incredibly positive. And it looks like lots of people feel the same way. Now, in these interviews, that John Tusser did when he was asking people, established people in their field, creative people, how they felt when they were working creatively. It is true that some people did feel exhilarated and marvelous and wonderful, just as we've guessed, but actually quite a lot felt very differently. Some felt very worried. Others absolutely could not sleep. Other people said things like, "It's such lonely work. I feel so alone." One person said, "Oh, it's so risky. I just think I'm going to fall flat on my face." Other people said, "You know, I feel like I'm building something, just pebble by pebble by pebble. It's a very difficult process." So that's interesting. I think that it's just like childbirth, I guess. A wonderful result, but pretty difficult process. So that's how it may feel. So how can we get better at being creative? Well, there is, as you probably know, a really big literature on creativity and creativity techniques. And when we get to the reading list, we can pick out some of the classic books on this. But some people suggest, oh, there's John Tusser's name, sorry, that was the guy who did the interviews. One answer to the question, how can we become more creative, is to say in a 3-phase creativity cycle. And the 3 phases are practice, reflect, and relax. And we're going to look briefly at these 3 phases. Now, under the practice part, the first phase, there are about 6 classic creativity techniques. And first one is, you won't be surprised, the first one is wake up. Because if you can't just wake up and be alert, nothing much is going to happen. And there's all sorts of fun things you can do to wake yourself up, apart from coffee, which is also very good. And you can wake your students up too. And I'll just give you a little example here of one. In fact, I think I'll take the second of those. The second wake up thing is the Jack and Jill went up. You chat to each other, your student asks your students to talk to each other, but every time they've just said a word, they have to say the number of letters in the word they just said. So if they were saying Jack and Jill went up the hill, they would have to say Jack, 4, and 3, Jill, 4, went, 4, up to. Now once they've got the hang of it with something they know well, they can just do it with hello, 5, how, 3, are, 3, you, 3, I'm, 1.5, fine, 4. If you try it, you can realize that, yeah, you do actually have to really concentrate, and it does wake you up. If we have time later on, we can go back to the counting game above, because that's really good fun too. So the first idea is basically to wake yourself up if you want to be creative, or wake your students up if you want them to be creative. And there are loads of ideas on how to do this. That's the first technique. Second technique is to be prolific. In other words, to produce a lot. Lots of quantity. Quantity first, and don't worry about the judgment yet. There is an apocryphal story about Einstein, actually, who we all think of as a very creative person. He was asked once, what's the difference between you and a normal person? I wonder what he felt like being asked that. I mean, it's not very nice, is it? It sounds like he's an abnormal person. But anyway, that's what he was asked. And apparently he said, what you can see, I hope, on the screen there, if you ask a normal person to find a needle in a haystack, the person would stop when they found the needle. I, on the other hand, would tear the haystack apart looking for all the possible needles. I love that quote. It's so unexpected. So, in other words, here we're going to ask our students and ourselves, we're going to push ourselves and our students past the normal small first answer or small example or offering that they give us. And again, there's loads and loads of techniques that you can use for this. Let's not do the puzzle. Let's go down to the one where it says more puzzles. Now, you can choose a letter of the alphabet, let's say B, and you can say to the students, could you please give me 5 words beginning with B? Now, if you teach teenagers, like I do sometimes, they'll probably say, 5? Oh no, not 5. To which you can answer, oh, okay, then 7. 7? Oh no, okay then, how about 10? And round about then they usually get the idea that you're only going to go up. So then they have to come up with 10 words beginning with the letter B. So it might be bed socks and booze, and I better not go on actually because I might come up with something unfortunate, but you get the idea. You're pushing students to do more than they normally do and not judging them for quality but pushing for quantity first. So that was our second one, our second group of classic creativity techniques. First, wake up. Second, produce a lot, be prolific. The third technique is to make unusual connections. There's a lovely language classroom exercise I learnt from Herbert Puchter once, long time ago, which is to do with practicing the second conditional in a rather unusual way. You ask your students to think of a person that they know really well. So I'll choose my friend Danny. And then you kind of make a connection with this person and a colour or a vehicle or an animal or a textile or a car. And you come up with lots of second conditional sentences like, I have a friend called Danny, and if she were a colour, she'd be a deep, rich red. Yeah. And if she were an animal, she'd be a black panther, without a doubt. A lovely, live, glossy, strong black panther. If she was a textile, I think she would be silk. Yeah, silk or maybe a rich brocade. And if she were a car, oh, no doubt about it, she would be a Bentley. One of those lovely old Bentleys with generous, smooth lines and upholstered leather seats and walnut dashboard. Lovely. Yes, so there we are, comparing, making unusual connections, making unusual combinations of things. This came up, you'll remember, on our creativity brainstorm right at the beginning. Unusual connections, unusual combinations is something that people recognize as being creative. And there are lots of ways you can do this for yourself if you're working on something or with students in class. So that's number 3, make unusual combinations and connections. Number 4, the fourth set of techniques, the fourth class of techniques is called make our thinking visible. Now we've already done this because we made a creativity brainstorm earlier on, and we were just talking about making unusual connections. So let's keep going with the unusual connections. Oh yes, there's another example. We could make a mind map of this talk, couldn't we? But here's a way of doing an unusual combination. and also making our thinking visible. Let's imagine that we want to compare a teacher, that's the person on the left, with an artist, person on the right. So we start thinking about the teacher who works from 8 to 5, well, probably longer, and shapes lessons and creates materials. And then on the right we have the artist who, in our imagination anyway, works all night and maybe shapes clay or something if they happen to be a potter. Now we're combining these two ideas. What's the same about a teacher and an artist? Well, we both work hard, we both shape things, we both create things. So this is just a simple example of how we can make our thinking visible using Venn diagrams, mind maps, and there are lots of other diagrams and graphic organizers that we can use too. There's a lovely book in the references which you'll see later by Machalko called Cracking Creativity, and he's got lots of ideas as to how to make our thinking visible. Right, so that was number 4. We're on to number 5 now. The 5th technique, or the 5th group of techniques I should say, is to use very simple but very generative frameworks. I think possibly the simplest and most generative framework I've ever come across in my personal life is the one that follows from the old adage, if what you're doing isn't working, change what you're doing. In other words, do something differently every day. Now, do something differently every day. Gosh, it could be something as small as wearing a watch on a different wrist, or not wearing a watch at all if you normally do, or wearing a colour that you never normally do wear, taking a different route to school or to your friend's house, just becoming conscious of our own patterns and then deciding to change something and do something different every day. Really interesting, that one. Now, thinking of more of a classroom activity, doing something differently could be an alteration dictation. I expect you know about these. I'll give you an incredibly simple example. You dictate a sentence to students and you ask them to write it down. So you dictate, for example, the sentence, I like apples. And the students write that down. And then you ask them to alter or change that dictation, that sentence, to reflect a bit more what they actually feel. So one person might change it to, I don't like apples, and write that down. Another person might write, I like some apples, and somebody else might write, oh, actually I prefer bananas. The instruction is incredibly simple. We'll first write the sentence down as it's dictated, and then secondly, simply change it, alter it to something that you really believe and you really feel. But it produces a fantastic variety of ideas and sentences. So that was our number 5. Use simple generative frameworks, and that's just a quick example there. Our 6th set of techniques is collaborate and share. Now, we know this, don't we, that 2 heads are better than one, that by working together and sharing ideas and building on each other's ideas, then we can create a lot more than we can on our own. But collaborating and sharing is sometimes not easy. I don't know, but it seems to me that in a staff room as a bunch of teachers, There are always some people that you can share with easily and you get on with well, and there's other people that somehow it's a bit prickly or it doesn't kind of work quite as well. So we need to have some ground rules, don't we? We are, I hope, sharing right now. At least I'm doing a lot of the sharing to start with, but hopefully later on when we get your questions and comments, it'll come right back. But the question we could ask is how do we make a good conversation? We'll need to have some ground rules like, don't argue, don't interrupt, listen as well as possible, extend the ideas that somebody comes up with, so to tease it out, to take it just, or what somebody said to me once is taking an idea for a walk, which I think is a lovely expression. So when other people come up with ideas, help them to take their ideas for a walk. So there we are. That was phase 1, which you'll remember was called practice. And we had 6 sets of techniques in that particular phase. We had, the first one was wake up. Second one was be prolific, produce a lot, don't worry about the quality yet. Third one was make unusual connections and combinations. Fourth was make our thinking visible, and then use simple generative frameworks. And this one that we're on now, collaborate and share. So that was phase 1. Oh, now there's a little mistake on this slide. Sorry about this. This should actually say the second phase of the creativity cycle. So that's a mistake. Sorry about that. I just have a sip of water. There we are. So the second phase of the creativity cycle, reflect. And of course, everybody does this in different ways. Some people just like to think on their own. Other people like to discuss with colleagues, which is a kind of thinking out loud, I guess. Others like to question, to ponder, to make notes, diagrams, make thinking visible, as we were saying earlier on. The whole thing here is, having had this intense time of practicing with any number of techniques from the 6 categories earlier, there has to be a bit of time to settle them, to let it stew, to let it marinate if you're a cook. And then the next phase is called relax. So we had practice, the second phase here, and the next phase will be called relax. Now, you remember at the beginning we said when we want knowledge we can go inside ourselves or we can go outside ourselves. If we go inside ourselves and we think of why do we need to relax after we've practiced and reflected? But we have this old wisdom that we know about, don't we? Let's sleep on it. How often do we go round and round with a decision and we're not sure what to do, and somebody says to us, why don't you just sleep on it? So that's our kind of experience wisdom. Our wisdom from inside, sleep on it. But actually, there is wisdom from the outside that backs that up too. There is a research study which is very, very interesting. In a study, some researchers found that sleep helped to stimulate creative thinking. They had a control group, they had 3 groups, and they set these groups the same puzzles to do with maths and statistics and things. And they gave them a break after they'd been trying very hard to solve these puzzles. And one group just went for a walk, I think. Another group just kept trying to solve the puzzles. And another group had a nap. And they found that that the people who had had a nap actually came back to the puzzles and were able to find solutions to the very same puzzles, the solutions that had eluded them before they went to sleep. So I think that's kind of interesting. It backs up what we know inside ourselves as our internal wisdom, that we do need to sleep on it. The nice thing about this third phase, being relax and even sleeping, is that if at work you feel a bit tired and you put your head down for a minute and somebody catches you snoozing, you can always say that, oh, well, I was just practicing the third part of my creativity cycle. Well, it's worth a try anyway, isn't it? So there we are. We've got practice and experience, some classic creativity techniques, and we had a little taste of some. And then reflect, and then relax. And that is the three-phase creativity cycle. If we have time, a little bit later on, we could perhaps whiz back and do some other examples. But that is basically, if you read lots and lots of books on classic creativity techniques, quite a lot of them will fall under those three phases and specifically under the 6 categories of the practice phase. Now let's see, have we got any threads left hanging? I think we do. Wasn't there a bit of a story early on, I think? Do you remember there was a teacher once upon a time, and she wanted to get across some important point, so she asked her students to, well, what did she ask? Ah, yes, to bring the bucket and the stones, that's right, yeah. And then she kept asking a question, didn't she? Is the bucket full? And she got them bringing stones and sand and water and everything, and then she kept saying, is it full, is it full? And finally they agreed it was. And then she asked to the students, what do you think was the point of the exercise? It's quite interesting what the students said, actually. One student said, I think the point of the exercise was to see if we were really obedient, and you found out that we were. Somebody else said, another student said, well, I think it was because we'd been sitting down for too long and you thought it would be good for us to get some exercise. And another student said, a very collaborative type of student said, I think you were trying to encourage us to work as a team. And another person who was very, very thoughtful student said, no, I think it meant we should deal with the big important things first, like the rocks, and the small details like the sand and the water later on. I think that was an educational principle you were trying to give us. Well, the teacher looked around, looked at all the students who'd spoken and who hadn't, and spotted a student at the back who was busy eating a packet of crisps, and said, you haven't said much, Donna. What do you think it meant? And the student looked a bit surprised and said, oh, well, I think it means that no matter how full you are after a big dinner, you can always squeeze in a little dessert. I like this story because I think it just goes to show that whatever we do in the classroom, the students will always be creative and make their own personal sense out of it. There are. A lesson with 16 students means there are actually 16 lessons going on. Well, now that's kind of pretty much all I had to say, I think. So I'm just going to turn my microphone off for a second just to have a cough. I'll be back in a second, I promise. There we are, sorry about that. Now, I think we've got some questions now from people. I wish I could hear your lovely voices. but at least I can see, I think, some questions on my screen. There we are. Now, let's see. Oh, right. Where can I find out? So sorry. Anna. Oh, Anna from Kiev, Ukraine, with the most beautiful surname, which I don't think I can pronounce. I'll try. Ostapushenko. Please forgive me if it's wrong. Where can you find out more about the reflect phase, the second phase? Well, I would strongly suggest you have a look at the reading list in a minute, which we'll put up in just a sec, and have a look at the Machalko book called Cracking Creativity. And there are absolutely loads of ideas in there, so that might help, I think. Let's see. Oh, here's a nice one. Stephen Dodd has written, do teachers suffer from do teachers suffer from too much creativity? Oh, what a wonderful, wonderful question. Do you mean they suffer too much from other people's creativity, like, oh, we've just decided to change your syllabus, so you have a brand new syllabus. Oh, by the way, you have to teach kids who are a different age group than you're used to. Oh, and could you please use this new course book? I wonder if you mean that they're suffering too much from other people's creativity. Or the idea of suffering too much from your own creativity, having too many ideas and not being able to prioritize. Well, I guess I did talk about being prolific, but that's kind of for starters. At some stage, I guess, there has to be some editing or reviewing for quality purposes. And here, oh, Stephen, you've come back to me, thank you. Do you think being inspired by creative people can create creativity? Yes, I do. I think one of the greatest things we can do is follow people who we believe are inspiring, and somehow a bit of that aura, that energy, that sheer pleasure and inspiration will help us to be more creative. Yes, I do believe that. Let's see, Marjorie, I think I missed it. Marjorie Rosenberg, Austria. Hello, Marjorie. And I think I missed it. Did the bucket represent something particular? Well, my question is to you is, as you listen to the story, what did you think the bucket represented? I mean, actually, the story just is a way of indicating that no matter what a teacher does, with whatever piece of material or whatever aim, the students actually make their own sense of it. So you have to make sense of the bucket, sorry. Now, I'm trying to find another question here. Sydney Pratt. Sydney, hello, I haven't seen you for years. I remember you. We met ages ago in Y, didn't we? It says, do you know about using radar graphs to evaluate students? I'm afraid I am ignorant. I know nothing about radar graphs to evaluate students, but please email me and tell me all about it. I'd love to learn. Sona from Armenia. Is it possible to assess creativity? Yes. I think one has one's, if you are the person creating, or the person who is creating, will have their own feelings about what is good work, what is important work. And I think that interior sense of judgment, or that interior principles and guidelines, are the most important. But then, of course, people assess it from the outside. So if you're a writer, can you sell your stories? If you're a painter, can you sell your paintings? Or do people want to hang your paintings in their living spaces? That, I guess, is another kind of assessment, isn't it? If people want to live with your work or even pay money for your work. I personally believe that the internal standards that we carry around with us when we feel we want to judge our own work, those are the most important. But of course we get those internal feelings by exposing ourselves to lots of other people's creativity too, so that we match a little bit against people who inspire us or other people who are doing similar things, and we kind of match ourselves against those to see how we are similar or different. Sydney says, thank you, Sydney, for coming back to me. I would be happy to share a PowerPoint about them. It's very creative. Great. Well, I'm hoping one of the wonderful technical people who are helping us today can answer your question there. Is there a way that you can share that with us? Or certainly, if you send it to them, they will send it on to me, and we can email each other about it. Let's see. I'm trying to find... Anna, you are funny. Anna again, from Ukraine. Should creative teachers always smile? Oh, first of all, I have to say I hate shoulds. And no, I don't really think creative teachers necessarily have to always do anything except something different every day to change their habits. Let's see, I'm going up the list here. Christine Drack from Greece. We've said that creativity includes colour and music and many more. How about someone that cannot see or listen? Is creativity as ability? Where does it come from? Oh, yes. Well, I did say that creativity in a language lesson could include colour and music. If you have the sense of sight and if you have the sense of hearing. If you don't, you still have the sense of touch and you still have the sense of smell. And a lovely surprise thing to do, especially because you live in Greece, the land of aromatic herbs. I can only do this lesson in the summer because I have to wait until the weather here is good enough for my rosemary plants and my basil and my thyme and my lemon balm and my verbena and my scented geranium to flower and to come into leaf. And then I take some of those leaves and take them into class just for fun. And we have a sniff and think about the language that will go with each smell. For example, whether the smell is soothing or refreshing or zingy or whatever. Now, you live in Greece, so you can probably do that lovely lesson all year round. I've lost the rest of your question. Oh, let's have a look. Deepsy S. Oh, I wonder if you're the lady I think you are. I believe that lack of resources leads to creativity. Oh, that's a nice one. Thank you, Deepthi. She says, I believe that lack of resources leads to creativity. That's nice, isn't it? It's like necessity is the mother of invention. It is a truth in India where most of the teachers work in circumstances where there is a dearth of resources. They can't help but be creative. So I guess the lesser the resources to help you or divert you, the more creative you are. Do you agree? Yes, yes, yes. That is a wonderful point. Absolutely. You just have to make do. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Of course, this is coming up methodologically in whole schools of thought on things like dogme, D-O-G-M-E, the dogme method, where people are trying to make lessons and courses from the students themselves and not use technology so much. Oh, Deepthi, it is you. Thank you, yes. Deepthi and I know each other a little bit because we worked on a text together once. Now, let's have a look. Have I missed anyone? Larisa Utkina from Russia. I hope I said your name okay. When and how do most creative ideas come to you, Tessa? Well, thank you, first of all, for thinking I might have a few. I have to say that I study quite hard, but then, once my head feels full, I go for a walk. And I walk around my neighborhood. I'm very lucky because I live in a kind of rural area. And I walk around a lot, and I walk and I think and I breathe and I walk fast and I walk faster. And sometimes I just stop because an idea comes to me. And then, of course, I'm scared of forgetting it. So I have to pick up a stone and put it in my pocket. And when I get home, I say, why have I got a stone in my pocket? And then I have to try to remember the idea. Now, I'm a little bit worried about running out of time, and you haven't seen the resources sheet yet. Beautiful technical people, is it possible to show, yes, thank you so much. I just wanted to show you this one. I'm hoping that you've got a resources list there, and I did promise that I would pick out the ones which were specifically for language teachers. So if you have a look down that list, let me show you one which is specifically, there we are. The first one that is specifically for language teachers is Hadfield. Hadfield, Jill and Charlie, 2003. That is specifically for language teachers. As is the next one, Maley A. That's Alan Maley, who doesn't live far from me, actually. He lives in Kent too. Short and sweet. And then, if you go down a little bit further, you have Pugliese, which I might have spelt wrong. Oh no, I've spelt it right. Chaz Pugliese, Being Creative. That is also specifically for us language teachers. As is Sai, unusual name. Can you see it? T-S-A-I. Bonnie Sai and Judith Feher. That's also specifically for language teachers. And then, sorry about this, Woodward. That's me, and that's for language teachers too. You might like to know about a new group. If you go down to the bottom line and then go back up one line, can you see that it says there is a 2013 launched C group? That's the creativity group. And if you're interested in meeting and getting in touch with other language teachers like us who are really interested in oh, thank you for the arrow. Sorry, I forgot to do it. If you go to that web address, you can see their website. And if you're going to the IATEFL conference coming up in Harrogate soon, this creativity group, quite a few of them are going to be meeting there, and you can get in touch with them there. So that is specifically language teachers and specifically on this topic. So I think that could be a pretty useful group to know about. Now, I'm just wondering if I'm running over time or something. Marjorie, what do you think? Are we about there? Hello, you're back. Can I hear you?
My audio.
Yes, there you are. We can hear you.
Can you hear me, really?
Yes.
Is my audio working?
It is for me. Hello.
Okay. To do something. Yes, I think we are about to wrap up. This was fantastic, Tessa, as I was sure it would be. There's so much out there in the field of creativity, and so many of these things are little springboards. You get the idea and then you just take off and run with it, which is what I love about these kinds of webinars and ideas and sharing. There were some great things people were writing in the chat box as well. I think everyone enjoyed it. We had quite a crowd here. We were up to, with the presenters, at about 120 people, which is wonderful.
Great.
And yes, very happy. And Tessa, thank you so much for your time.
Oh,
Is this your first webinar?
Oh, no.
Is this the first one you...
No,
oh, okay.
I've done some for a Cambridge English teacher. Oh, shouldn't say that, sorry.
No, that's fine. Not a problem. Okay, well, I just want to make a couple of announcements. We're starting with the SIG webinars. Okay, the SIGs, the special interest groups of IATEFL, also offer webinars. The Business English SIG is offering one on the importance of incorporating life skills in ELT with Bethany Cagnall on Sunday, the 9th of February at 3 p.m. GMT, which is UK time. And the LT SIG has got one hashtag AusELT. I'm assuming it's Australia, but I don't know. Maintaining and developing an online community of practice, which is on Sunday, the 16th of February at 2 p.m. GMT, or UK time. And the next IATEFL webinar, which will be the 9th in this series, is with Michael McCarthy, called Spoken Fluency Revisited, on Saturday, the 22nd of February at 3 p.m. GMT. This can be accessed as you access the one today, also the SIG webinars. The IATEFL webinars, as we mentioned, the recordings are then for members only. This is a member benefit. We open it to all for the webinar, but only the members can see the recordings. We do make the slides available for those of you who were watching the webinars on the IATEFL webinar page for a week. But the recordings will only be for the members. So I hope everyone enjoyed themselves today. This was fascinating, and I hope to see everyone at another webinar soon. And thank you so much, Tessa. Really great ideas. Looking forward to going back and looking at the slides. And maybe you can give us, at some point, the answer to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 question, what we do with that. I'm going to try the other one with the numbers of the words I say to wake myself up to get back into the English Village online and do some answering of comments there. So thank you all for taking part. It was wonderful having people here. And is anyone about ready to go to bed? Can you just write yes into the chat box?